Okay. Welcome to this will be actually the first official episode. I did a test episode with Tofu, and this will be kind of like the first official episode of Left on Red podcast. So
Awesome.
yeah, we got Sean DeBlack on the show with us. Sean, who the hell are you, and what are you doing here?
Hello. My name is Sean Black. I am a political Twitch streamer, content creator, digital activist, newly college grad now. I used to say college student a lot. I just graduated from college. And yeah, I just talk about politics. I talk about, Black things, the Black identity, commodification, navigating through the spaces of white supremacy in different spaces online, academia, and digital spaces as well. And that's sort of like my thing that I do for content online. I also do a little bit of work for Agency for Change for digital strategy. So we make a lot of cool coding programs that help, we call it incentivizing participation in unions. Really, it's just like we spam companies who are trying to union bust and their applications. They'd be like, yeah, you can't hire scabs. You have to actually negotiate with your union. And that's kind of the thing that I do there. Just kind of a lot in the leftist sphere.
I think that's because I think you and I have connections to the Hassan sphere, and I think what you described as kind of artificially spamming companies' anti-union page with bots. I think a video you made on TikTok was how I found out about you, and then I guess you got into Twitch after that.
Yeah, pretty much. I started my content creation journey just on TikTok during the pandemic because there's nothing really else to do.
Yeah.
And so I started making regular videos about BLM and police brutality, and I was kind of a liberal, honestly.
Okay.
I was just trying to figure out my political ideology, where do I lean, where do I stand? I know that the police are bad and they're wrong and doing the things that they're doing, but are they necessary? I was just asking myself these questions, and doing that, I cultivated a decent following. It's not decent, 10,000 followers on TikTok.
Wait, that ain't nothing.
That's true. And so from there, I met up with this group of other Black leftists on TikTok. Somehow, someway, I think somebody's one of my mutuals sent me this, said, hey, they're starting this group account. I think it'd be great for it. They were just a bunch of some very large, some pretty small leftists on TikTok were starting a group page called the Black Leftist Hype House. Got involved with them, made a couple of videos with them. It was a really pretty fun experience. And then from there, I just started to, it kind of dissolved. I started doing my own thing. And it wasn't until a year after I started TikTok, I think, or a couple months, I don't remember, where one of my mutuals did a video saying, hey, Greg Abbott's doing this crazy thing for the Texas abortion stuff. Trying to, set up a whistleblower site where you can snitch on women having abortions. And I was like, well, I'm in school for computer science and I am in this politics thing. So if TikTok is trying to spam this portal, I can make something for this. And that's sort of how it started, where it started as, it wasn't even anything, robust. It was a simple iOS shortcut that you can pull up on your phone and you can run it and it would automatically send applications to the forms to the whistleblower site. But that caught a lot of wind very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of days after I did that, the video went from 5,000 views to 500,000 views.
Holy shit.
And I was getting messages from news articles and journalists being hey, can we interview? Can we talk to you? And I'm just walking back from class and that journalist calls me. I'm like, who's this number? Answer this number. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm blah, blah, blah from Vice Media. Do you have time for an interview? And I'm like, I'm walking back from class, so let me call you back. So I go on the phone and immediately call my mom. I'm like, all right, I didn't tell you about this thing that I was doing, but I get it. I think I feel it's important that, I feel it's important now that I'm people were trying to write articles about me, and they were like, well, we don't really get it, but stay safe. And I was like, yeah, I'll try. And so that's kind of how it started. And now whenever there was something new, people would just come to me and at me hey, can you do this? Can you do this? So it was from the whistleblower site to the I think Kellogg's was the first one, the first actual application that I spanned.
Mm-hmm.
And then Starbucks, and the Kellogg's one and the Texas thing was before I joined Agency for Change. Those were things I just decided that I wanted to do. And then after that, Gen Z for Change found me. They reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we want you on the team." And from there, they provided me some resources because I didn't want to pay for like the server on AWS myself because AWS did not really like me very much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's sort of how it all started. And then at some point, Hassan picked up on it and like watched it on stream.
Somebody linked it in chat, I would suppose.
Yeah, and then it kind of like blew up to an insane degree from there. And I went from like 10,000, 15,000 on TikTok to like 50,000 followers.
That's crazy.
And so yeah, that's just sort of how it started.
Wait, he stole your content and you saw a boost in your platform afterward? Wait, that's not what I've been told.
Yeah, it's very like people are like very, you know, they're like it doesn't happen, but like it does happen.
Right.
It's like I always have respect to Hassan's way for doing that because he wasn't even intentionally.
Cross-pollination is right. It's in content creation space. It's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And it kind of sucks now because the whole reaction meta thing is kind of blew up on Twitch. You see, even if like there hasn't been any like policy changes on Twitch or YouTube side, you definitely see people who are less wary to like react to content in the same way that they used to be. And I don't really get exposed to the same amount of like YouTubers, TikTokers, or other content creators that I used to by other streamers watching their videos. It kind of sucks.
Yeah. I want to touch on that in a second, but you were talking to your parents about it, and they were like, you know, just be safe, because they probably don't like fully understand what you do, even like today, and you're successful on multiple platforms now. When you describe to your family what you do, what do you tell them? Because my family still doesn't understand it, and my grandma thinks that I'm doing like underground pirate radio for like communist cells all throughout like Latin America. She thinks I'm doing like Che Guevara stuff, and I just tell her like I'm Rush Limbaugh without like the racism, and I'm alive.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Honestly, the pirate thing is kind of cool though. You should put that on your resume. That's actually kind of sick. Yeah. But it's true. Like, you know, my parents aren't like, you know, too old. My mom's birthday today. Happy birthday, Mom.
Oh, happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah. So like, but like, it's hard to kind of get them to even grasp like Twitch as a concept, because they are, I mean, they're tech savvy enough. They understand like social media, but like I would be talking about them like 6 months after I started streaming, and I'm like, hey, like, you know, I'm gonna be alive like for like 8 hours today. So like, you know, if I don't answer, you can call up to me. That's probably why. And after I finish, I come down to like, you've been live for 8 hours. I'm like, yeah, that's what I said I was doing. And they're like, what do you do? Do you just like watch videos and stuff? Like, I'm like, sometimes I play games and stuff like that. And they're like, people watch that? I'm like, yeah, people are very successful doing that. So it's very hard to get them to understand. But then the added layer of the political aspect on top of it is, I won't say it was very like difficult, but like it was hard to sort of get my parents to understand, like, because it is like a very weird legal gray area in like, where does it, you know, cross into like, you know, DDoS territory? And so try and get them to understand that I'm trying to be safe, but this is something that I'm passionate about. This is how I feel like I can make a change in the world, and this is what I want to do. Yeah. But like, you know, they very quickly, you know, turned around and was like, all right, we're going to support you, right? We're going to, if you need a lawyer, we're going to try to get you a lawyer, get you a, you know, PR manager or whatever you need, you know what I mean?
Damn,
to keep you safe. I was like, appreciate that, but like, we already got lawyer money like that. So that's, they're very, very, what's the word, supportive of my endeavors. And I think it's by consequence of being like the middle child. My brother probably got like the worst of it because he went to college, he dropped out his sophomore year. And so my parents were very much trying to navigate what to do with him, and him going into like doing photography and doing creative things, and not going into like a stable 9-to-5 job. And so I guess when he went through that, and now they see me coming up and also being like, you know, I got through college, but I also don't want to do the 9-to-5 job. They're like, okay, well, we did this with your brother, so we understand how, you know, how you kids operate now.
Yeah. Yeah, I already had like a creative in the family. So I kind of like easily translated. That's awesome. I'm not a middle child. I'm the oldest of two. I have a sister who's 7 years younger than I am, and she doesn't work. Like, she's a stay-at-home mom. You know, she just, boyfriend works and pays the bills. And while my mom is very supportive, she doesn't exactly get it, but she pops into like stream every now and then. I know her account, and I just don't point it out to people. But when I see her in there, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you're in here now, and not when I was literally just talking about like Donald Trump's fat ass and like how much I love it. You know?
Yeah.
It's very embarrassing. Like, because I don't talk to my dad anymore. I'm not super close with any of my family. It's my grandmother. She doesn't get it, right? And no matter how many times I explain it to them, it's always like, she's very anti-communist. Like, she grew up in the South, and whenever I explain to her, like, I do work with DSA, I do like mutual aid benefits and stuff like that, and the moment I say something like anti-capitalist or anti-Trump, it's immediately like, you know, people are gonna like try and kill you, right? It's like, well, hold on now. You don't understand what I do, but you know that people are gonna kill me for it.
Right.
She thinks I'm gonna get Fred Hampton or something like that, and I'm like, I am. Well, maybe not like FBI, you know. I don't know if you've dealt with like threats. I mean, you've gotten like a lot of more traffic across your platforms than me, but I've gotten very few, no credible threats at all. So it's not something that's on my mind constantly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because I have got a couple of people who tried to like, you know what I mean? It's Twitter. It's regular Twitter people stuff who like go in your DMs and be like, I'm gonna have to kill you or whatever. I'm like, sure, whatever, like what are you gonna do? But there are a couple of people who will like try to like find my school and stuff, which I mean I don't hide it. I'm not like ashamed of my like if you want to try to get me kicked out of school, I mean, go for it. Like, I highly recommend you do. Just go somewhere else.
Save me
like
from student loans.
I mean, exactly. I've already been to 3 institutions. Like, I can go to a 4th one. Like, it doesn't really matter to me.
So your degree was in computer science, you said?
Yeah, computer science.
Like you know enough about like OPSEC to not necessarily like have that in the forefront of your mind all the time, right?
Yeah. And the craziest part is like I was hoping I wanted to drop out so many times. Because school, I can say this now from being in like 4.5 years and getting out. School did nothing for me.
Right.
Like going to school during COVID kind of killed all like the social aspect of it for me. And like the informational aspect of it, school, college, very not great for computer science. Mm-hmm. You have a lot better use of your time, a lot more cost efficient to just learn on your own. So like everything that I've did so far was all self-taught. And I got more job offers, you know, after doing the Texas abortions spamming bot than like graduating, you know, college and applying for jobs.
Yeah, that's what I found. Like, I only worked in tech as like a tech support, like, you know, turn off your computer, turn it back on type tech supports. And I have like no background. I know nothing about computers. I just know how to fix my own stuff if it's relatively still working. And the people I worked with, none of them went to school because they all just like went online, got like an A+ certification, maybe got like certified in Java or something, and that was like their bona fides. And if they had like enough of a resume, like that was enough. I feel like tech is, while it's a trade, you know, because we're now in that age, it's still kind of outside of the norms of trade, where like if you want to be a nurse, you got to go get like an LPN or an RN.
Yeah.
Tech, you can kind of just like have some bona fides behind you, and people will hire the person who knows more than the person who's got more like, you know, degrees.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, tech as college is good if you are going to a place that has the name recognition where you can get the networking opportunities. Because it is about who you know, and that's like, you know, one of the worst parts about capitalism. In that even if you have like the knowledge, even if you go through all the schooling and do what you were told to do from the moment you were born, you're still not like guaranteed a successful position, even if you have a degree that's like coveted like computer science. Let alone if you have like a history degree or an English degree, something that like, you know, isn't as valued in a capitalist society, unfortunately. It's the worst.
Do you feel like it's the same degree of kind of, you feel like people would turn down someone with a like a computer science, which is that liberal arts degree program, or is that
STEM?
What does that fall under? Because I'm a sociology major, and that was a liberal arts degree. What is CS under?
Yes, it's this is weird. It's mostly STEM. It's like you know, your engineerings and stuff. It's a lot of
Bachelor of
times,
Science.
yeah.
Okay.
But there's also like arts sections of it if you want to do like design. It's very weird. But it's mostly like bachelor's of science.
Gotcha. So like you found yourself kind of launched into a little bit more notoriety than you probably expected, just doing like light activism and, you know, a little like for your own hobby content. Once you were in the space, once you were like a regular streamer, you were like, it was known that you were like live on Twitch and that you had like regular content on TikTok. What was entering that space like for you? Because I had no platform, I had no like cloud, I had nothing going into streaming except for like followers back when I used to do cosplay on Instagram. Like what was that like for you though? Because your circumstances, you're in school, you're like I think 10 years younger than I am. So I don't know, it was, I would imagine it's much different going into it at your level. You know, what was that like?
It is extremely different. I would say that it's I don't want to say like harder, but it's pretty tough having an established platform and people and knowing people who know who you are and somehow trying to cultivate continued growth and success from that notoriety. I think that's like something very difficult to like kind of grasp, because when you are growing from nothing, growing from no notoriety, any growth is good growth. You can see your metrics, you can see continued growth and success from there. But like coming from notoriety, and I assume this is kind of like what like celebrities go through when they try to like start streaming, which is why a lot of them like don't. Like I know Gabby Ann tried to start streaming like a while ago. But like
he's always on playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, and so from that, I think that a problem that you notice or something that psychologically hurts you is like you're like, I thought I was popping, like I thought that I was doing well, but like I'm not seeing that conversion from like a TikTok audience to Twitch, or from a Twitter audience or X, whatever, Twitter audience to like YouTube. And so trying to, you feel like you spend more time worrying about how to get your audience to follow you from a different platform than you do actually making good creative like content that you enjoy.
Right.
I think that's something that I've been struggling to like get through my head. And I think it was very difficult because I was also in school and I did have 2 jobs while trying to do content on top of that. And so I was stretching myself very thin, trying to, I wake up in the morning at 8 o'clock and from 9 to, noon, I work at one of my internships. And then I go to, school, I do classes and homework for the next 4 hours. And then after that, I do like Gen Z for Change work. And then I do more homework. And the next day I wake up and then I try to stream and try to cultivate an audience that way. And it's just, it felt like I had a lot going on. I couldn't really focus or even really enjoy the content after a certain point. Because I'm like,
it was a chore at that point.
Yeah, basically. It was basically another job that I enjoyed doing because I enjoyed going live and I enjoyed cultivating a community. But I did not like when you post on Twitter and you're like, hey, I'm live now, and you're like, I have 30,000 followers on Twitter, and like, people they like to enjoy or engage with my content when I'm doing my coding stuff. Like, oh, you're the best activist. You're doing so much for us. Like, oh, women's rights, or women, thank you for protecting women's rights. Like, you're so young and we love what you're doing. I'm like, okay, cool, awesome, amazing. Like, I would like support in my other avenues. Like, yeah, basically.
No, I get it. I get it.
It's just, it was very tough. And it wasn't until I started streaming full time that I finally realize that it's kind of not even really about that. It's not even really about how many people are watching you or how much you're growing, and it's more about the impact you have on the people that do watch you. Like I have some people who are like, when I'm talking about things or I'm explaining things, having a good dialogue with my chat, people are like, I appreciate your perspective. Like I disagree with you when we start talking about this conversation, but now like I can see this from a different way. And I think that's like hearing that and just hearing that back and forth where like I changed my chat's mind, sometimes they change my mind. I feel like I didn't really get that when I was, doing all the other stuff because it was all lost in trying to grow and trying to, be successful and trying to be like, the next big thing.
Right. There is a weird dynamic that I've noticed in my chat that I don't see. I have a couple like, openly conservative and like not socialist chatters. And
Right.
I get that every now and then from them. And those interactions I really look forward to. But I've noticed now that I have like a core audience that I know we're going to peak at this time during the day. And after that, people are going to like go home. They're going to get off work. They're going to go over to like other streams that come on during the day that are like bigger political channels.
Right.
And I don't see too many of those like newer dissenting voices anymore. And one of the things, like you said, trying to diversify, trying to figure out like how can I like enter into new spaces while also like getting those new people that are interested in like YouTube, TikTok to come over here where the main content is.
Right.
And I just don't know how to like strike that nerve. And I don't know if it's, I know some people are saying that people are checking out of politics right now because Brandon is like awful. The genocide is like very taxing mentally, and people just, we know what the outcome of the current like primaries is going to be. We know what the outcome is. Brandon's going to be the nominee. Trump's going to be the nominee. Round 2, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, anything can happen in the next couple of months, but like until the craziness starts, just nobody's interested. They're super fatigued. There's been so much over the last couple of years from 2016 to 2020, and it was brunch in 2021.
Yeah.
It was brunch hours. People just checked the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable because I think this is like a perfect storm of a lot of things that just allowed for the last 4 years to be a good online space to grow as a creator, but like, bad to live in America.
Yeah.
Through like, like COVID and like, this like, Biden just not really doing much to help working class people. But like allow people to be like, okay, we don't want another Trump, or we don't, want to go through this again. How do we, or we're stuck inside during COVID. Like, how do we, fix these issues? BLM is another good example.
Mm-hmm.
How do we like fix these issues? And people are going to find political content that did well, which is why like 2020 was huge for growing as a creator. And now I think it is like a lot of people checking out of politics. Because like even like January 6th's anniversary was like a couple of days, like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And it didn't even really feel like anything. It felt like, going through the motions.
There was a recent poll that like 44% of like voters now believe that the election wasn't legitimate across like party lines. Like
that's crazy.
We've gone like up, we've gone backwards, more backwards.
Yeah.
Where I figured after like a couple of years, most of like the Republican base would be like, yeah, we kind of fucked up there. That it was a little crazy. Things were wild. We all got the brain rot. No, they're like more hardline now, and even some Dems are like, how did the corpse win? And like he sucks so bad. I thought like this was the most pro-labor, most progressive, most based Dark Brandon president ever. What happened? Like, well, they're not that different when you really think about it. There's a measurable difference between like what would happen today under Trump, given Palestine, given the resurgence of COVID, whatever it is, economy's still in the shitter. But I guess there hasn't been enough of like a seismic shift, and I don't know if anybody was really expecting a seismic shift, but a noticeable feeling of like relief. It's mostly just quiet. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
It's just silence instead of every person on Instagram throwing up like, black squares and, like hashtag resisting. Yeah.
And I think it was a little bit of that. I think it was a little more like, like Black Squares was very much like a liberal like a movement. I think you see a little bit of that with Palestine, and you saw like a huge wave of support in October.
Yep.
But again, like when you are, if you're like a random college student, it's just not much you can do. And you've protested, you've yelled about a ceasefire, you've petitioned your own representative for a ceasefire, and and you know, we're all yelling about it at the same time. But like when you have a very clear administration who doesn't really care, they're like, we're not gonna do that. Yeah. So of course you're gonna have people who are like feeling like disillusioned at least about the efficacy of, you know, like protesting or like direct action.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly, I mean, this 2020 feels like it was forever ago, but at the same time, just yesterday, and it did feel, at least leading into the election, like there was just this massive uprising happening. Some people in like my activist spaces locally hate that I call it an uprising because they're like older generation. They remember like the, you know, war on terror, anti-war movements. And some of them are like, you know, Occupy Wall Street activists, and they're like, right. Oh, uprising. You don't, get out of here. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Last time I saw the capital city, like crazy helicopter footage of them going over the city while there was like a bunch of fires, you know, that still kind of sticks in my memory, I guess. But there was certainly more a sustained, very vocal like outcry for multiple months. And I think fundamentally people recognize that there is more possibility for change domestically when it comes to like policing than there is for ending apartheid. Like that is a monumental like structure to even budge, while there can be even, albeit liberal, reforms that you can do like for policing in America. That's a whole other question of like, you know, Palestine being free or some kind of consequences being done. So I don't know if it's like burnout, I don't know if it's fatigue, or people didn't realize how bad it is, and this is kind of the first time people are recognizing like, holy fuck, Israel's crazy. But yeah, I think people have looked at it so much that now they're just disgusted by it and can't even give a little mental space for it, which I don't blame them. You know, covering it sucks.
Yeah, which is why I actually respect what you do, because I couldn't. I like, we look at news sometimes on my stream, but like sometimes I like to take a step back from like the horrors of the like contemporary news cycle and more analyze not like meaningless things, but things that exist so we can like talk about the wider systems of oppression like around it. Mm-hmm. So like I say drama a lot. It's become a meme. So like whenever I say drama, I have a bot that boos me. Mm-hmm. But like when we talk about like drama and the way that drama exists, I like to take that and extrapolate that into something that could be actionable in, you know, if not the chatter that I, you know, is in my chat, somebody who sees a clip of it online about like, you know, this is something that happens, but this is how generally Democrats operate. Or like, you know, we're talking about like representation in like, you know, like the streamer space, or we're talking about commodification of like the Black community, or talking about a good example is the DoorDash discourse that keeps popping up every few weeks about like should like DoorDashers like bring your food to the door, and if they don't, are they being ableist and anti-disability? Oh, and like it's actually like a disability like service. And like I feel like everybody always talks about like the very like, you know, minutia of it, like, oh well, like as an individual DoorDasher, it's your job to do this, or like X, Y, and Z. But I feel like it's a conversation that's missing the perspective of like of capitalism, of how capitalism incentivizes corporations to exist till we have these conversations and not like talking about themselves. So why are we talking? Like, why does DoorDash even exist? Right. Why is there not a robust structure for delivery services for people with disabilities baked into the U.S. government itself? Why are we privatizing that when that should be a nationalized service?
Yeah, Meals on Wheels. That's what that's supposed to be for.
Yeah, and it's just not very robust, or not as robust as it needs to be. And so more taking like that drama topic of like, are DoorDashers ableist, and expanding that to like wider, you know, conversations is sort of what I enjoy doing. Because like the news, it's just it gets too much for me sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if I could go back, what inspired me to like get into like the political content creation is I used to love the segments on Majority Report where like libertarians would call in, and Sam would kind of like Socratic method his way through those conversations, and
Right.
there is no longer the, I guess, meta within political content creation of like capitalism versus socialism. That conversation's been had, and I think for the most part, like anti-capitalists realize that you're never going to budge people in that setting on that that idea of like socialism actually being good, and capitalists realize that, or pro-capitalist arguments would say, our arguments kind of suck and we're constantly getting rolled by people, so let's just not even worry about it anymore. There's obviously still like a section of the space that still does that, but for the most part, like the debate is over. But I would love to go back to not the debate part, but the conversation of capitalism versus socialism. I would love to like go back to those conversations instead of constantly talking about either, you know, apartheid, is it apartheid, is it not apartheid, or how much the Democratic Party sucks shit because the only like good thing Brandon's done in the last like 3 years is a couple pieces of like I don't know, national park legislation to like protect parks, and going on the picket line with the UAW, because everything else has just been like rotating villain after rotating villain, just getting in the way, and you know, typical Democratic Party structure stuff. I want to go back to like trying to convince people who love capitalism and want to be landlords that they're not going to get a bag. I would love that instead of what I currently do. But I mean, it's kind of like transformed into that.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the reason why I think, not that it doesn't happen, but why it's very difficult to even have that conversation is because, like an Ouroboros, like the left just keeps eating itself. It cannot stop, like having or engaging with this like infighting culture where it directly attacks people who are having this conversation. We can't even have a conversation about capitalism versus socialism because the people will be like, what about communism? You know what I mean? What about, why are you not talking about communism? Are you a fake leftist because you hate communism?
Yes.
And it's just...
This exists outside of the the online space too. Like, I went to, I was invited by some LSU students for Palestine organizers to speak to them because one of them is a chatter of mine. And afterwards, I like did my little like thing. I talked to everybody, and afterwards, as everyone's kind of dispersing, this little kid comes up to me, like 19, and he like immediately started Fed posting and being like, yeah, you know, you talked about the IDF training police. You know, I kind of wish they would all just get shot in the face. And I'm like, okay, first of all, kid, calm down. I was like, focus on unionizing your workplace first. And he goes, I'll never forget this shit. He goes, I would like to detach the idea of unions from more Western-centric concepts. And I'm like, we don't even have healthcare, man. How about healthcare? How about, you know, some housing? And then we can talk about the decolonization of the Western communist mind. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. And I don't know what it is.
I think that it comes a little bit, because I saw this on TikTok. Like, I hate that I started on TikTok, but it was good for my perspective. And that I saw this exact concept on TikTok. Like, I saw people who knew nothing about like leftism or communism or socialism, who, you know, identified themselves as liberal, who like got rolled in a little TikTok debate or whatever. They went and they picked up a little book and they started reading too much theory. Like, reading theory is good, but like they started reading too much theory, and now they're like changing their political ideology every, you know, 10 seconds based upon the last theorist that they read.
They're doing the power war for leftism.
Yeah, basically. And so like now they're 100% like just like digging their heels in, and anybody that's not literally the last person they read is, you know, a, you know, fake leftist, you know, liberal who's a reformist and who wants to tear down the Vanguard Party and stop them from garnering power in America or whatever. I'm like, it's just, and the worst part is because of the way these platforms are cultivated, that there's an incentive for people to have that take instead of actually building coalitions. It's much more lucrative to be the leftist be the communist who hates, you know, other leftists, right? Socialists,
Stalinist, vanguardist. I'm a Maoist, Leninist, third worldist, and only a people's protracted revolution will bring about a public transportation. Ridiculous.
It's so dumb because like not even that their ideology is incorrect. Like I feel as though we all want the same thing. We all have the same goals. The problem is that there's no level of pragmatism in actual like building of actual like things that work for people, actual material condition improvement. And I think it comes from a level of accelerationism from some of these people, not all of them, but like some of these people are just like, you know, the West is not gonna, you know, be the head of the revolution. Yeah. And like things need to be people are too comfortable under Biden, and we need Trump back in so that we can, you know, get people garner more support. So people aren't as checked out in politics. And I understand why people like believe that. But it's just, I think it comes from a misguided perspective on the left, because our goal should be making things better for all people. And, you know, I don't understand why people are like, you know, we should make things worse. I don't know. It's weird.
I think, it's the instant gratification of being a content creator or trying to enter into the content creation space. Metrics is everything, and if you take that same type of approach of like trying to constantly grow, trying to see like that there is a payoff, at least like down the road, where like I may not be making enough money streaming or posting on TikTok through the creator fund, but I can see that within, you know, if we keep increasing this at this rate, I'll see something. But that's not how politics works. Like legislation is measured on like 10-year timelines. So to say that we need to do a revolution now, or like, you know, we're not going to ever be able to like solve climate change until we get rid of capitalism. It's like, well, one, yeah, that's true. But also, you're posting on TikTok.
Yeah.
Not that like posting on Twitch or being live on Twitch or YouTube is like better. It's that we're not in a position to like change that. Like our role as content creators is education, is to agitate people, it's to do agitprop, it's to kind of like activate people's, you know, base desires, like you said, of like things should be better. I should know more about how they can be better and how to do that. And people want like a 60-second, you know, a TikTok guide to overthrowing the you know, the modern aristocracy. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, burnout in activist circles is very, very prevalent. I mean, just in the 4 years I've been working with DSA Baton Rouge, I've seen dozens of people come and go because the expectation is we're going to be at the city hall every weekend during meetings, and we're going to be, you know, putting, you know, paint all over the walls, and, you know, we're going to be obstructing climate. Like, no, that's not how it works. Most of it, as far as like local activism, is like getting people registered to vote, doing break light clinics, doing food programs, free kitchens, stuff like that. It's activism. I think people have this idea of like, we're going marching, and like that's my activism. And like, no, most of it's very boring point of order stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the stuff is needed. Like you need somebody to run a food program in your local area. And but like people, like if you're, because we're talking about like content creators on TikTok, most content creators have a very express goal of growth. Like that's their metric. And a lot of people, or some people, you know, see that and are like, yeah, like my goal, and understand that their role that is not direct praxis, but like educating people so that they can also go and do direct practice. But like a lot of content creators think that politics starts and stops with what they do. They say like, I'm doing the real practices by, you know, being the best, you know, communist that I can be. And those, you know, DSA people are being the fake leftists by not doing what I'm doing. Without understanding that like the goal should be, if your politics are based and rooted in empathy, more people can eat, more people have clean clothes in the winter, more people will have housing or can afford, you know, to make rent. And if you have programs that are doing that, I don't even care if they call themselves communist, leftist, socialist, or liberal. I think more of that is good. Yeah,
I mean, there's always going to be that like utilitarian calculus of like, Palestine coverage is depressing for people. We talked about that earlier, and where I'm not covering Palestine anymore, but we are making sure that we're getting like everything we need to know of what's currently happening. Here's like the big highlights of like the news today for Palestine. And let's also focus on, domestic and like labor news, because that's disgusting for a lot of people and they can't listen to it. So without alienating them, I'm like reducing some of my Palestine coverage to trade up for other things. And I think that the utilitarian calculus a lot of people who are trying to enter into is, do I advocate for the most, I don't know, equitable outcomes, or do I be as inflammatory as I can so that I can get that ball rolling? And your ball will always need to be rolled is the problem. So you're always sacrificing like, what is the appropriate coverage? What is like the fun stuff? What is the thing that's going to get me the most views? And there is also the purity politics that exists in like every space. The right wing does this, the liberals do this, leftists do this more than anyone else, because our whole thing is like, we're not someone else. We're not the right, we're not the center.
Right.
And while I've seen a definite shift in the political space, one thing that you mentioned earlier was like the representation that we're seeing more in the political space. FD, yourself, Oliemi, there's so many different content creators that are like giving different perspectives. And because most of what was formerly known as BreadTube, or like the political Twitch poll, was white dominated, it was overwhelmingly men, it was overwhelmingly, people like me. So as any space that's like this, you know this probably better than anyone, a space that's typically white male dominated, the moment that anything outside of that norm enters in with different perspectives, different expectations, that space immediately freaks out and infights. And that goes for not just like more like id poll type conversations, that goes for anyone who's like, hey, maybe being homophobic tactically is not how we, actually build coalitions. Maybe, debate ableism is probably not the way that we actually educate people, and that's more blood sport. So yeah, as Sean Dublack, what is representation like in this space from like where you're coming from? Because you're I don't want to like, if you don't want to talk about like where you're from in the country, but I'm pretty sure you and I are both from like pretty rural areas, right?
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina.
Okay, yeah. So, oh Jesus. Yeah, so you and I probably have like kind of similar experiences growing up in those types of areas, but go ahead. I want to hear like your perspective on it.
So I think that is a very good conversation that I don't think has had a lot about like representation in like, not even just like political space, but like in content creating space, like as a whole. But it's an added layer of it to like in like leftist regions, because identity politics does exist, and it is used by liberals as a shield to deflect criticism of them. And this is true, and it's very hard to have that conversation without people being like, "Huh, that's why, black people are bad." Also, I'm like, that's not really what the topic of the discussion is. But like growing as a content creator in this space, it was very not different, because it's kind of like what you see as a black person generally, but like seeing not really any black faces is something that like sticks out to you. Right? It's not something that you like consciously are like, hey, there's no black people here, but like you're looking at this, you're like, you don't see somebody that like looks like you in these spaces. And it wasn't until like I saw FD Signifier's videos that I was like, I like his videos, and I think I can make videos like that, which is why I started creating content on YouTube to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I feel like representation is so important, because oftentimes when you have a space that is very much like white-centric, male-centric, they, unconsciously so, could, be, perpetuating biases in ways that they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times in these spaces, because it's so white and male-centric, it goes unchecked. Sometimes it's from those specific creators who are like, the big creators. They cultivate spaces that are like that so that they can continue to appeal to the right wing. And it's disappointing to see that like you like have a space that's leftist. You're like, okay, I can join this space. This space would be good for me because it's for the liberation of all people. You join this community, join this space, and it's like, actually we say slurs here. Like, no, actually, like,
Is that what you
we
mean
don't.
by cultivating like slightly to the right so that you can kind of
Yeah.
shift them over?
Yeah.
Do you
So like
think
you
that
have.
the conversion thought of like, oh, we're gonna like rehabilitate people kind of leaves people in the community who do not come from like that background kind of in the dust? Do you feel like they're kind of left in the background to try and convert
Yeah.
like more conservative white people?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I do think that that's something that for communities that have the express goal of like, my goal is to appeal to like, the races or to the right. A lot of times that comes at the expense of the marginalized people in these communities. And it's something you have to balance, because I do think it's good. Somebody needs to be the conversion space for, formerly racist people. Somebody needs to do that work. But the problem comes in because the left is very much for liberation of people. It's for fighting for marginalized people. There is some level of allowed bigotry that is, allowed in these spaces to allow space for those formerly racist people to grow. And it's a very weird conversation, because in a space where there's no space for, people who hold racist beliefs or racist tendencies or sexist beliefs or sexist tendencies to grow, then they're just going to be purged from the community at the first sign of any, sort of iffy comment. Right. Which, we can have a conversation whether or not that's good or not. But like, if you allow that to happen and you try to educate that person, you're still allowing that to happen in a space where that has marginalized people in there.
Right.
And it is a very tough thing to navigate as a creator in this space. But I think that a good balance that you should try to strive for is not necessarily allowing or engaging with the bigotry itself, but still allowing space for people to grow. And it's a conversation that's weird for like a lot of Black people, because I don't speak for all Black people. Some people are like, no, if you one time, one and done, you're cooked in my books. But I'm like, I'll take a step back and I'll be like, you can say what you can have your takes, and I'll allow you to to grow in your position, and then we'll reevaluate from there. And so it's a very strange conversation to try to navigate. But my goal for like as a whole with representation is just to exist so that if there's another, Shonda Black watching, looking for content creators, looking for leftists, then they can, basically they can be like, oh, so I see, this Black Twitch streamer is doing it as well. Maybe I should also do it.
Have you ever done a community census to see like what the demographics of your audience looks like?
No, I have not. I have not.
I think you and I share like a pretty sizable portion of both of our audiences. I don't think it would surprise anyone that it's mostly a predominantly white audience, because it is like Twitch, at least. I don't know about your TikTok demographics, but I would imagine that you, Doodle, and several other POC content creators on Twitch, Caroline as well, would have a probably like less white audience than like someone like me, right? But whenever you're looking at those spaces that are like white content creators like myself, where do you think that most of the failures in that attempt to be representative of a more diverse coalition, a more diverse audience, where do you think it normally falls off? Because I would imagine that a lot of these like slip ups or failures to meet that bar, that standard, if there is one, is mostly unintentional, or like in trying to do that, they find themselves doing it anyway.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, if it does happen, like it happens definitely less in like other space internet. So like the left is generally better. It is a better space for marginalized people than like your 2016 YouTuber spaces or your comic book spaces. Yeah. Like those are horrible spaces to be in if you are a marginalized person in any regard. I think that existing in political spaces on Twitch specifically, a lot of times it is something that is unintentional, which is why having marginalized voices there that you feel comfortable calling on or who feel comfortable calling you out is so important. If you've cultivated a community that is basically an echo chamber for you, where every black person who tries to disagree with you is doing identity politics and is not to be taken seriously on the left. Then when you do slip up, when you do accidentally or otherwise use racism, or you do a racist, okay, you do a little bit of a racism,
It's a little oozy racism.
yeah, you accidentally drop a slur or whatever. You can't, there's nobody to call you out on it. There's nobody to feel comfortable checking you on it, and thus it leads to your space not actively changing and growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think having a diverse perspective in this space just generally is a good idea. Even just from a purely selfish perspective, not putting on other marginalized voices. It's so that you have somebody who can check you on your behavior so that it doesn't become an issue in the future.
Yeah, I guess it's not about just putting a face to it. It's about the perspective, the knowledge or the connections that you have to it, right? Because if I just talk about Palestine, but I never have Caprice on Poppy, who is Palestinian Christian, right? Never talk to him about it, never get his perspective. As someone in the space, it's like a peer, and I'm just kind of saying what I think the Palestinian perspective is, then I'm just kind of giving my own takes and projecting that onto people.
Yeah. And it's
go ahead.
I was going to say that it's generally good for the audience as well, because a lot of times the audience isn't following people of color or following marginalized people just because the audience just doesn't know.
Right.
This is a conversation about how algorithms work and what's being pushed out to people, and how to grow as a content creator who is marginalized. But the audience, statistically speaking, is more likely to be pushed a white content creator than they are to be pushed a person of color, and that's just how it is. And so if the audience is now inadvertently parroting some microaggressions in their day-to-day life, they just don't know. That can be mitigated if they were just aware of more marginalized content creators, and having that community and being in community with those content creators do a service for you and does a service for your audience as well.
Yeah, there's also in the resistance to that changing of your perspective, I think there is a lot of I guess the word would be idolatry when it comes to content creators in politics, because it's not just that you like someone's content, that you think they're funny, or that you think they're a cool person or hot or whatever it is. You now have your worldview tied to that person, because this is a politics space, and leftist politics in particular have to do with doing better as a person, and also learning and growing, growth, rehabilitation. Right. That's a big word we throw around a lot, and that creates this parasocial relationship where it's not when your favorite lefty content creator is getting accused of microaggressions or being insensitive to certain marginalized groups because of the language that they use, or not paying their editors, not a real leftist enough. You now, because you like that person, you have your own sense of self tied to them, your own identity. It feels like an attack on you. So when I guess maybe you can expand on this. I would guess that whenever marginalized viewers, people from marginalized backgrounds, see that their creator is being accused of racism or accused of being insensitive to certain groups, they would think, well, I agree with everything they say, so you must be saying that I'm racist too. It's no, that's that person. If you think that's you, that you might want to introspect on that a little bit. But that's just perhaps light, valid criticism that person's getting. And then that's where all the infighting of community wars and brigading subreddits comes from.
Yeah, basically, I think that's exactly what it is. In that, because we are in a political space, and because people kind of tie their identity to their favorite politics person, they are unable to accept criticism of that person because it is a reflection of themselves. And I think that comes from maybe a dividing or dissolving that parasocial barrier between you and that content creator, and understanding that you are not them, they are not you, and you can have disagreements, or you can, oppose something that they have said without, being a deranged hater, or without disagreeing with them on everything as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's just a function of the left, because the left just generally is more critical of itself than like the right is. The right is like, doesn't matter if you're a Nazi, if you're a fascist. I mean, Nazis are fascists, or if you're like a conservative or libertarian. It doesn't matter who you are. You all serve the same goal of promoting fascism, and so they're like, they don't really care. But on the left, it's any minor difference is is so wide to like each leftist like ideologically, that it's very hard to I don't know how to say this. It's very hard to coincide that with your identity. So if your favorite leftist who taught you all about leftism and is very smart to you comes out and was like, hey, someone says, hey, this person said something that's not great, you're like, well, he taught me everything that I know, and I say the stuff that he says.
Mm-hmm.
So like, does that make me racist? And I think it's more of understanding that doing a microaggression or saying something unintentionally racist does not make you a bad person, unless you aren't willing to learn from it.
Yeah, I think you are right that there's a lot of introspection that we do, and it's a lot of self-criticism, which already, once you dive into like, instead of just introspecting and like trying to unlearn biases, and now you're getting into like self-crit, you're entering into like bad mental spaces, instead of like understanding that you're more left today than you were yesterday. And like, you yourself were probably a reactionary. You were probably posting on poll. You were probably like in Facebook comment sections telling people that they're like, like using ableist slurs or whatever. We were all in the Halo 2 COD lobbies. Okay, Xbox Live like COD lobbies is a real thing. We were all there at one point. Instead of giving people an opportunity and like doing introspection, now you're just getting into a big feedback loop of, I know more than you because I grew, and you should know more because I was able to unlearn it. It's like,
yeah,
no one did that for you. So be the person that you wish you would have been there. And this goes for like the creators too. It's not just audiences. Creators get into this, and it's super frustrating because I feel like in the space we run in, because there are cliques, that definitely is a thing that happens in online spaces, whether it's like you're in a creator organization like 100 Thieves or Offline TV, or you're in like the Twitch poll or the Hassan Orbit, whatever it is. There are cliques, but it does feel like in certain circles, everyone just kind of like, you're doing a great job, do your thing, man, bit raids, we love this person, share their stuff whenever they post fun stuff, and hype each other up as much as we can. And I wish that the broader space would just do that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the separation between these groups is, other than like, some people, their only content is that. As their only content is purity politics, instead of how do we, I hate to constantly use the word coalition build, but really that is it. Like, how do you build a stronger, like more unified like space where you can say good things are good, bad things are bad?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's a good question. I mean, if I had the answer, we would already be doing it. But I think that it goes back to like the monetary incentive for that type of behavior. Like, if you're spending all of your time calling out like specific people, like, if there's a monetary incentive behind it, like
engagement.
Yeah, like there's an entire complex, and this extends like even past Hassan into like like Destiny or whatever. Like people have spent their entire content lives calling out specific people, and when you do that, it doesn't matter who that person is, you are very much so doing a disservice to your audience itself, because they're not getting the information that they could be getting. They're not getting the analysis. They're not getting actual ways to unionize their workplace. They're not actually getting ways to combat the racism in their family. Your content is strictly about a specific person, which, I mean, even if I disagree with Destiny, like, I don't talk about them.
Yeah.
I don't talk about these other streamers for the most part, or other content creators, or even like the Ben Shapiro. I think it extends to like Ben Shapiro as well. When we have like an entire focus about how bad. 'Cause I used to do that. I used to do like on TikTok responding to conservatives. I used to stitch conservatives videos, conservative hype house. And,
to be fair, the conservative content has fallen the fuck off over the last 2 years. It sucks now. It's awful. They used to post some fire cringe stuff.
Yeah, on TikTok they all got banned, which is sad.
Yeah.
But I stopped doing it because it felt as though I wasn't having as much of an impact. I felt as though I when I talked about the commodification of the Black identity, or why the Democratic Party sucks, or like, you know, talk about unions, why unions are good and why unions are necessary, and about you know, even like theory from like a theoretical basis, talk about state and revolution, or like the mythology of work, or whatever I talk about. I feel like I have more fun and I'm more impactful on my audience talking about that stuff than I am with carrying my content specifically around conservative response to like the dumb stuff that they're saying. But for a long period of time, that's what got played. You put Ben Shapiro in the title, people clicked it, people watched it.
Yep.
And even if it's like it's a good response, the question I always ask is that the most impactful thing for the audience? Are the people getting stuff out of this, or is this just for me to feel good?
Yeah. Like for a period of time when I mean, literally earlier 2023, from like January to July, when like 500 something anti-trans bills were introduced in like state and local houses, Matt Walsh was a relative person to look at, because he was one of the like principal thought leaders, if you can call it that, for those pieces of legislation. So that was relevant. But now no one talks about Matt Walsh. We just all understand he's a piece of shit. He sucks, you know? And hey, outside of, you know, constantly talking about kids' genitals, he really doesn't have anything to say. He's got nothing to say on Palestine. He's got nothing to say on, you know, why we should defend Israel, or why the border is wide open. We know exactly what he thinks about it. He's a fucking fascist. He has it in his Twitter bio, you know? Like, what else is new?
Yeah, and so I think that it does still do a service to call these people out and call out their problematic behavior. But I think that oftentimes we get kind of lost in the sauce, in that we start to, because we are passionate about these issues, because these people are insane and will actively make people's lives worse.
Mm-hmm.
We feed into what they want us to do, and that is talk about them and call them out and stitch them and respond to them and quote tweet them, because then they feed off of that. They get paid off of that, and they can now be like, look how crazy these leftists are. They're, you know what I mean? This is what they believe. When if we were just sitting in our space, educating people about you know, that trans people exist and that they deserve to have human rights. I mean, if they go out of their way to like take a video of somebody saying, you know, trans people deserve to have human rights, and it's like, this person is bad, most even normies are like this, like, no. I mean, I think that they also deserve. Yeah, it's like, but when we like go out of our way to like get into like their talking points, which they're trained on, right? It's trained to be in such a way where like, oh, like, you know, maybe this Matt Walsh guy has a good idea or has a good concept, and this leftist person doesn't know what he's talking about. We're like fighting on their grounds. Yeah. And so I think it's just something that we just have to be more aware of as the left, instead of just like angrily responding to every fascist that's on the timeline. Just more taking a step back and be like, is this aiding the fascists? Is this doing what the fascists want to do?
How much impact are they having? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you are right. I mean, there's a whole like cottage industry ever since Musk made it to where you can get paid to post, that these people like End Wokeness and Censored Men and Clown World and whoever, Elijah Schaefer on Twitter, that's all they do. They just sit all day and like brew up in a cauldron the most cringe, bigoted, rage farming tweet they can, and then they just post that and, you know, let the cycle go for the next like 48 hours at most, and then back at it again, back to the drawing board. But speaking of cringe content, I wanted to talk to you about anime today, but I wanted to do it behind the paywall, and just to let everybody who's going to be watching the video know, the paywalled content is going to be available on Patreon whenever we hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So hit the button, ring the bell, and hit that like button, all that